Flat Earth is a pretty divisive issue, to say the least. The subject has fascinated me for the 2 years since I became aware that there is an ongoing debate about the nature of our shared physical reality. Unfortunately, with most commentary on the internet being done anonymously, both sides of the debate frequently forget their manners. For the record, if someone resorts to personal attacks and/or excessive swearing, they have categorically lost the debate regardless of the quality of their argument. You cannot claim the intellectual high ground if you're foaming at the mouth and hurling poorly spelled insults at total strangers over the internet, behaviour exhibited on all sides of this debate. The fact that this is such a massive trigger for so many is a big part of the fascination for me. If you claim you don't just believe but that you know it's a globe, why are you losing your cool? Another disclaimer before I get started here is that Flat Earth for me is little more than a thought experiment. I approach it as a philosophical question, just as I believe did the ancient Greeks, who are often credited with first floating the idea that perhaps we in fact live on the surface of a giant globe. I have no ego invested in, nor emotional attachment to either the globe I, along with everyone else, was raised to unquestioningly believe was real, or to any alternative model. I believed in the giant spinning space pair for 30 years, then I questioned it and stopped believing. That is all. That's not to say I may not change my opinion again in the future, however. With the advent of commercial spaceflight on the artificially curved horizon, surely we will be able to put this ridiculous debate to bed almost as soon as it was begun. Let's hope SpaceX managed to produce something that isn't quite so reliant on computer graphics next time. I'm not making a personal attack on the man featured in this video or globe believers generally. I am merely cross-referencing the things he presents as proofs of the globe in an attempt to demonstrate the lazy thinking that comes with defending what one assumes to be a foregone conclusion. This is in my experience the primary reason many people will not or simply are unable to properly challenge their own belief in the globe. I hope also to demonstrate that simply because someone is reckoned to be a so-called expert in a given field of human understanding, this does not mean they have considered all the angles or have all the answers, and may in fact work directly against them in these endeavours simply because they are railroaded by their formal training into certain avenues of thinking. This is the Achilles heel of the "let's just ask an expert" culture, most frequently demonstrated by mainstream news broadcasters and of academia in general. The astronomer in the video was being interviewed on a variety of subjects, most of which he was experienced in. Flat Earth presumably was included by the interviewers for comic effect, and it is immediately apparent he has spent little to no time on the subject. This video is not intended to debunk anything or to prove anything else. It's designed to help the truly open-minded become free of dogmatic thinking. I believe this is something exploring the Flat Earth idea and other related topics has helped me with. Straight off the bat, I've got to raise an issue with this image. I'll get onto this later in the video as there are others of a similar nature.
I'm Dr. Stuart Clark. I'm an astronomer and I'm the author of The Unknown Universe. It's so clearly obvious that the world isn't flat.
Unless you actually go outside and look at the world around you, in which case it looks flat. That's got to be priority number one for anyone making a serious attempt to understand Flat Earth theory. If you can't be honest with yourself and admit even privately that the world around us is telling our five senses in no uncertain terms that we are on a flat stationary plane at the centre of the visible universe, this is always going to be a non-starter for you. Of course, what our senses tell us doesn't necessarily mean it's definitely a flat motionless plane, but if you can admit that it is a reasonable premise, you have your foot in the door, so to speak, when it comes to understanding Flat Earth theory. Otherwise, save yourself the confusion, forget about Flat Earth and just enjoy the globe fairy tale as you have done all your life thus far. Stop watching this video and any others like it right now. You're still here.
We see when ships leave the harbour, you can see as they gradually disappear below the horizon.
Objects vanishing over the horizon is the first so-called proof, and this is something we all believe happens, even though few of us can claim to have ever closely observed it ourselves. Cameras such as the Nikon Coolpix P1000 are nowadays commonly available with up to 125 times optical zoom. Many people are zooming in on horizons and sharing their findings. Does this look like a boat descending down the far side of a curved surface to you? Or is it disappearing into a horizontal vanishing point? How about this one? Is the boat in the background in this shot flying? Or does it just appear to do so due to an optical illusion called mirror distortion, or more traditionally, fata morgana? Yes, the first boat may well be disappearing hull first, as we are told it should, but to conclude this is due to the boat travelling over curved water is to ignore what these high-powered cameras are revealing to the contrary. What if I told you this effect can be recreated over any suitably flat surface? In this video, YouTuber Phuket Word has recreated the effect on top of a dam measured at a mere 650 metres in length. Are we to believe the top of the dam is curved, or could there be another explanation? How does perspective work in tandem with our altitude relative to the surface in question to move the horizon nearer or further? If we have a very unscientific confirmation bias to the effect that the horizon is a result of water curving away from us, then of course the boats are obviously sailing down the curve, the Earth is a globe. I urge anyone with a genuine interest in learning more about the mysterious way horizons work to view Phuket Word's video titled Seeing Imaginary Curvature on Flat Earth. I will link it in the description box. Another well-documented optical effect called atmospheric refraction, used by both flat and globe Earth proponents to explain all sorts of observations, can be demonstrated on a very small scale, for example a tabletop, and shows how entire city skylines can appear to be hiding behind curvature that may not necessarily be present. Again, there is a working experimental demonstration by YouTuber The Potter's Clay, linked below.
You can see if you go up onto a tall tower or a hill and you see more over the horizon.
If you increase your altitude, you can certainly see further, but this is not inconsistent with what we'd expect to see on an infinite flat plane. The extra terrain that comes into view was not necessarily hidden behind any theoretical curve. In fact, what we see is that the horizon is not the surface dropping out of sight, but a horizontal vanishing point. Looking out the window of a plane immediately after takeoff as you ascend to a cruising altitude of around 30 to 40,000 feet illustrates this point nicely. The horizon will remain almost at eye level whilst it hurtles away from you in whichever direction you care to look. Keeping that image in mind, now watch this boat viewed from sea level sailing over the horizon. Knowing that the horizon is only around 4 to 8 miles distant at this near sea level viewing angle, and under the right conditions could potentially be several hundreds of miles distant when viewed from your seat on an aircraft. Could the theoretical curve really be the explanation for this phenomenon? Either the curve is pronounced enough I can watch a boat disappear at a range of approximately 6 miles, or it's not pronounced enough for me to see it from 40,000 feet. It cannot be both. As you begin to open up to the possibility that we have been deceived somehow, and to be perfectly honest, flat earth theory is not exactly what I'd call beginner level at all. One of the first things you will learn is that all directly observable so-called proofs of the globe are in fact open to interpretation one way or the other. Yes, I said one way or the other. I'm not interested in attempting to prove the theoretical flat earth so much as I am in showing belief in the globe for what it is, a belief. If you are able to let go temporarily of your learned confirmation bias towards the globe-based explanation, you will effortlessly see how the infinite flat plane model is at least equal in explaining our sensory experience of Earth and the heavens. Physical reality is dualistic in nature, and to go one further, responds to the observer's biases. That is, as far as I'm concerned, what honest, open-minded study of flat Earth theory demonstrates at every turn.
All our physics is constructed now. The physics of orbits, actually things going around the Earth, is all constructed with three-dimensional spherical world.
So what they've done is construct a virtual 3D model inside of computers onto which operators can plot coordinates. This can be done regardless of the actual physical properties of the thing being modelled, in this case the Earth. This is effectively the reverse procedure of creating usable flat maps of a theoretically spherical Earth, which, if we assume the globe, cartographers must have been doing since before anyone apparently knew it was spherical. No one has any difficulty navigating by flat modern sea charts or locating things on a traditional flat map of the supposedly spherical world. The now famous azimuthal equidistant or Gleason projection, frequently touted by many flat earthers as their preferred alternative geography, was in fact created specifically for navigation purposes and is used as a logo by the International Civil Aviation Authority, the International Maritime Organization and the World Meteorological Organization, not to mention the United Nations. It preserves longitudinal coordinates while sacrificing the shape and relative dimensions of land masses. Globe believers defending their position often cite the millions of people who work with the fact that the Earth is round every single day, and claim that these people would have to be lying about the shape to the rest of us. NASA, for example, employs more than 17,000 people, every single one of which I think it is quite reasonable to suggest believed they were living on a globe before they had even started school, let alone got a job working for an aerospace corporation. These people aren't in on any sort of conspiracy and they don't need to be. Just like most of the rest of us, they've never examined the evidence or seriously considered any alternative either.
And the pictures from space show our world as a globe.
The pictures from space fall into two categories. In the first category, they're taken with a barrel distortion lens such as the conventional GoPro Hero camera as seen on NASA's ISS spacewalk footage and Felix Baumgartner's famous Red Bull jump. Without going into too much detail, near objects and those central to the frame receive moderate distortion, whilst far objects and those located to the edge of the shot are made to curve more visibly. We know these buildings have straight edges in reality. Given that NASA claimed 250 miles as the altitude of the ISS, compared to about 6 or 7 when taking an international flight on a passenger aircraft, that makes Earth's horizon in these images very far away indeed, subjecting it to significant distortion, either exaggerating any curve that is there, or adding one which shouldn't be present at all. Either way, these images are somewhat flawed. During the moments immediately following Baumgartner's exit from his capsule, we can see the horizon flip from convex, as we would expect to see on the ball Earth of course, to concave. This is the barrel distortion lens at work, a familiar effect to GoPro camera users such as myself. Also interesting to note on the Red Bull jump is the exact same amount of discernible curvature at 10,000, 20,000 and 127,000 feet, the height of Baumgartner's exit from the capsule. The visible curve in the Red Bull space jump video, all the way up to 127,000 feet, is demonstrably a result of the use of a curved lens and not an honest representation of physical reality. To claim otherwise would be extremely disingenuous. This piece of garlic bread was launched on a weather balloon, and the man behind it said,
"The idea that all those publicity stunts actually made it to space is helped by the fact that the fisheye lens on some of the cameras that they use means that the curve of the Earth looks a lot more dramatic than it really is at that height. Now, we're using cameras that correct for that, so what you'll see on screen is more or less what you'd see up there."
It topped out at an altitude of just over 35 kilometres, around 115,000 feet. That's just 12,000 short of Baumgartner's capsule. If the curve is really there to be seen, why all the thinly veiled trickery? Taking into account amateur weather balloon footage and videos shot by tourists on high altitude MiG flights, these little cameras are the number one reason people are convinced they have seen visual evidence that we live on a globe. The second category of pictures of Earth from space is satellite imagery, which can be divided into two further subcategories. Low Earth orbit passes of the surface, 300 miles claimed, which is a little higher than the ISS at 254, which are then compiled in Photoshop and mapped to a computer model of a globe. Often misinterpreted as legitimate photographs of the Earth from space, a simple side-by-side comparison reveals this not to be the case, as continents frequently change size and shape. The whole thing changes colour. These are not photographs but CGI composites. Indeed, this is a fact acknowledged by the people who create these images. In the making of this documentary, I also took a look at the new Google Earth. Google Earth is actually a composite of satellite, drone and aircraft images stitched together and manipulated into a seamless virtual world by Google's custom-built software. This 3D virtual rendering of our world is a truly amazing thing to behold. Despite radically advancing technology, we are still yet to create anything real enough to deceive the human eye, however. That is interesting. Whatever force of nature created us saw fit to equip us with eyes that with correct application can discern even the most convincing illusions from truth. It will be interesting to see if this holds true in the future. Remember, space tourism is just around the corner. The second subcategory of images from space are extremely long-range digital images taken by satellites such as NASA's Deep Space Climate Observatory or DISCOVER satellite, said to be orbiting Earth in what's called a Lissajous orbit, taking pictures at the Lagrange point between our home and the Sun. That's where the two bodies' gravity is equal. This point is said to be approximately 1 million miles from Earth, 90 million from the Sun. No, this is not sci-fi, folks. This thing moves at incredible speed and takes perfect digital pictures of Earth at least 12 times a day. The images are disappointingly CGI looking in nature and not even claimed to be actual conventional photographs. Instead, according to the NASA Epic Discover website, the Earth Polychromatic Imaging Camera, EPIC, is a 10-channel spectroradiometer using a charge-coupled device and a 30cm aperture Cassegrain telescope to produce images which are created using the bands from EPIC that are within the human visual range, color and brightness adjusted to represent what a conventional camera would produce. So I know this thing exists, there are pictures of it being assembled. I know they fired it into the sky, here's a picture of its successful launch in 2015, and here's a sequence of images showing the moon transiting the Earth during a solar eclipse. If I was an American taxpayer, I would be asking for my money back at this point.
And yet somehow, there are some people that still seem to believe that the Earth is flat.
There are some people who believe the Earth is flat, or various other shapes, and they're perfectly entitled to those beliefs. It's more than a little disingenuous to suggest that anyone still believes the Earth is flat, however. I would wager that 99.9% of genuine flat earthers spent their entire lives believing they lived on a globe until they were confronted with the possibility that might not be the case. So they don't still believe it's flat, they just began to question whether or not the Earth is in fact an 8,000 mile diameter oblate spheroid filled with molten rock spinning on its wobbly axis at 1,000 miles per hour as it hurtles through a vacuum at 67,000 miles per hour whilst retaining its fragile atmosphere. And call me crazy, but it certainly doesn't seem that way.
So as human beings, we love stories. Because stories make sense of our lives, of our world, they endow it with meaning, and they can be understandable. Science is a way of constructing what we hope is a true story, something that is demonstrably true through experiment. But as we see throughout the ages, the prevailing scientific theories of the day can be overturned as we move to more precise understanding of the universe around us. And generally speaking, those become more complicated. So there is a tendency for people to reject that reality.
Whilst it's true from one perspective that a lack of specialist understanding can cause a certain portion of us to dismiss a given explanation for something which sounds to us too contrived, there is also a tendency, it seems, for an even larger portion of us to passively assume the supremacy of an idea, also because we don't fully comprehend it. The very fact that one cannot simply observe these things, instead being wholly reliant on complex multidisciplinary theory, or on the issue of authorities who have been demonstrated time and again to be fudging their results, so to speak, is at the heart of the Flat Earth movement. The irony is, for the contemporary mainstream science equals unequivocal truth brigade, is that they are displaying so many of the qualities they profess to despise in their Flat Earth opponents. Flatheads call globetards stupid every single day and vice versa. Funny that.
There is a tendency for people to reject that reality, the science of the day, and just fall back on comfortable myths, things that make them feel at home, things that make them much happier that they know what's going on.
Such as the belief that we live on a spinning ball, for example. We're exposed to this idea as an unquestioned truth from an extremely early age. The ubiquitous globe image is everywhere on the internet, on corporate logos, those of news corporations, in Hollywood films. The reality is that the very notion that Earth may not be what we believe it is an extremely unsettling thought for the vast majority of humans who stop to consider it. To consider any alternative to the familiar globe is in fact the exact polar opposite of clinging to comfortable myths.
Or maybe they're just people who are just contrarian. I don't know.
Contrarian, trolling, or just congenitally stupid, take your pick. If you can dismiss as nonsense straight out of the gate the premise you are faced with, you don't even have to try to understand what is being presented, let alone attempt to integrate it with your existing understanding of reality. Mainstream media's main job is herding the flock safely away from ideas that threaten the status quo. This is usually achieved by labelling such things as conspiracy theories and fake news. Those of us who dare to wriggle out through the fence for a better look, however, often realise there's a little more to it than that.
No fucking way! Shit, they're lying to us! Fuck!
It's one of those things that I find so difficult to get my head around. I mean, I really do.
One reason flat earth theory is so hard for some people to get their head around could be the compartmentalisation of human thought through education. There is a time and place for creative thinking, and a debate about something within the magisteria of science is clearly not it. There are a few who advocate for flat earth from a purely natural science angle, but it seems that for the vast majority this is as much a philosophical question as a physical science one. Synergistic thinking between left and right brain, as distasteful as that might sound to the more educated among us, really is the key to breaking the mould where this and many other deliberately dismissively labelled conspiracy theories are concerned.
Imagine for a moment that the Earth was flat. Well, how much thickness does it then have? These are the kind of questions you'd have to ask.
A few seconds typing some words into Google reveals that the deepest hole humans have ever dug is the Kola super deep borehole in Russia at a depth of 12 kilometres. Based on currently available data, the flat Earth, if it even is ultimately physical in nature, is theoretically at least that thick.
Okay, you've got an edge. Well, would things fall off the edge?
You've got an edge? Where is the edge? Or are we just assuming there must be an edge to the flat Earth because there is a spherical edge all around the globe model we know and love? This comes up frequently, and it's like asking someone who subscribes to the mainstream model of physical reality, can you show me a picture of the edge of the universe? The answer, of course, is always, I cannot. Whenever we point a deep space telescope into the void, we just see an ever-expanding multitude of distant galaxies, but in theory, it could be out there somewhere.
How do you generate gravity to make the things fall? What is it that's actually causing the gravity to make things fall off the end?
Gravity becomes necessary when we assume a spherical world with up effectively any direction moving outwards directly away from the core, and down meaning the opposite of that. When people jump up and down on the spot or drop objects onto the floor, they are not demonstrating gravity as they imagine. They are demonstrating that their body or the object dropped is heavier than the volume of air it displaces, something we are taught would only be possible due to the influence of gravity, and only on a ball Earth. Truth be told, density and buoyancy laws and magnetism can account for all observable phenomena when it comes to objects falling, sinking and floating. Unless it's slipped my notice thus far, no one has yet recreated gravity on a human scale. That is, one where we can observe two or more bodies attracted to a greater mass at different angles. Whenever we're observing objects falling, ostensibly due to the action of gravity, they are always moving exactly parallel to each other and perpendicular to the ground. The one example I can think of where there is anything approaching an exception to this rule is in free-fall simulated zero gravity, such as on board the ISS, but the best they can do is make floating globules of water, a product of surface tension, not gravity. It is all very well making fun of someone for misunderstanding a concept, but without a working demonstration of something like water sticking to the exterior of a ball, for example, gravity remains just that, a concept. So in the video I'm cross-referencing, we've now been shown three artists' impressions, shall we say, of what the theoretical flat Earth may look like, and they're all clearly as fake as NASA's famous blue marbles. In fact, what we're being shown is, drumroll please, a flat version of the globe. We are so incapable of detaching ourselves from the deeply ingrained conceptual form of the Earth as a solid object with defined edges, be it a single all-encompassing spherical age or otherwise, and floating in the infinite void of space, that this is the best we can muster as the conceptual form of an alternative model. No wonder.
It's hard to even begin, actually, to talk about what a flat Earth would be like, because it's just so impossible.
Only if you've already made up your mind it's a globe, mate.